All right, awesome. That was a fantastic keynote by Sumedh, where he really encouraged all of us as cybersecurity analysts, teams, and whole industry to look at moving from attack surface management to risk surface management, right? And then how a program like Risk Operations Center or ROC with agentic AI would help you drive your cyber risk management at machine speed. Now, as he was talking about the Risk Operations Center or ROC as the program to drive this quickly enough at machine speed to be faster than your attackers. As a part of this session, what I'll cover is how Qualys is at work has been transforming current Qualys platform to be the world's first risk operations center, Enterprise TruRisk Management. And then we'll also look at some of the innovations we are bringing into the platform to help you drive this journey, all integrated with TruRisk, all to help you reduce your risk faster than your attackers are looking at all of these exposures. Now, before we do that, let's look at how we are looking at transforming the current platform. Now, this is your platform today, right? Qualys has always built the platform since last 20 years. The platform having the integrated apps, such as VMDR, CSAM, policy audit, or policy compliance, Total Cloud, which is CNAPP, Total AppSec, etc. You all know about this. They all provide dedicated workspace, dedicated apps for your dedicated use cases. The apps bring in the data from your hybrid environment, cloud container, your on-premise devices, etc., by using hybrid set of sensors. So agentless and agent-based activities bring the data back to our common infrastructure and common services, so that even if you're using different apps, it provides common experience. When you create the dashboard in CSAM versus VMDR versus patch, it provides common experience. Now, this platform is being transforming to become the first risk operations center platform, how we are looking at doing it. So let's look at it. So number one part, your dedicated workspaces, your dedicated apps for your use cases remain intact so that you will be able to drive your vulnerability management, your cloud security, etc., in your apps. But additionally, second part, we are bringing in all these assets, exposures, all your security findings, but also providing you the ability to bring these assets, exposures, and findings from non-Qualys security and IT tools, such as if you are using, say, Wiz for CNAPP, or if you are using check marks for web security, if you are using Defender on your corporate environment, bringing all of these security findings and assets together, correlating that with your intelligence from business, intelligence from your threat, and then bringing them all on the single risk plane with the agentic AI layer. Now, like Sumedh mentioned, this agentic AI layer is not just a frivolous chatbot, but it is really the fabric which is viewed across all of these capabilities, where you would be able to autonomously drive every single step in cyber risk management to reduce your risk. And on top of that, now let's just map it to what Sumedh talked about. What is your risk operations center made up of? So on top of that, this singular unified risk plane allows you to drive your CTAM, allows you to drive your ASPM, CRQ, and your compliance audit readiness related use cases. Now, while you drive all of these use cases, this is world's first risk operations center in play, Qualys ETM. Now, this ETM, as Sumedh talked about it, allows you to bring in exposures, assets, telemetry from Qualys as well as non-Qualys sources. The first thing it allows you to create is your unified asset inventory. And then bringing all the threat intelligence context, bringing in your business context, could be coming in from your CMDB, could be coming in from your GRC tools, or could be created even your Excel sheets, all coming together, correlated with your assets, your exposures, and your threat, so that you are able to know your risk, prioritize it, and reduce it faster. But at the end of the day, there are just 4 words what you need to look at: aggregate, prioritize, and reduce your risk. Now, the second part, what we will go over was that is how and what innovations what we are bringing in to help you drive each of these chevrons at machine speed. So that what Sumedh mentioned, like we need to be faster than these attackers, like -1 for some of the 0 days exploitation time. How can we actually look at driving each of these chevrons at machine speed? So let's start looking into each of these and see like how this risk operations center comes alive. So the first part of that, let's go over how the asset inventory, or you're able to make your unified asset inventory and able to also bring in various risk factors or exposures to your ETM. So the first thing first, cybersecurity asset management. How many of you use cybersecurity asset management today from Qualys? I see Rebecca, obviously, a bunch of you. Now, this capability has been absolutely tremendously taken well by our customer. 2,000 plus customers are leveraging that capability for a couple of reasons. One is this is the inventory which is created with the risk and the business context. So this is an inventory not for IT, but specifically created for your cybersecurity use cases. Now this is integrated with Qualys ETM that allows you to bring in all your asset telemetry from your known asset sources by using Qualys' multiple sensors. The same capability is now augmented to bring in data from your non-Qualys sources. So if you're using CrowdStrike, if you're using Defender, if you're using any of your other security and IT tools, it will help you bring in all of this asset data come together. Now, as all of this asset data come together, you want to correlate that for your business context. So it allows you to also get the data from all of your CMDBs, Active Directories, or even Excel sheets, like I said. What has been absolutely phenomenal with the cybersecurity asset management is your external attack surface report of your unknown assets. Now, this integrated with your ETM allows you to also bring in these almost 25% of the assets which are not known to you, but are known to your attacker. So if any one of you want this external attack surface report, like Sumedh said, this is available for your company to see how your attackers are looking into these assets, known to them and probably unknown to you. All of this unknown assets-related data coming in not just from the likes of Shodan, but from various other indicators. This forms your unified asset inventory of your known and unknown assets. Now, specifically also bringing in the advantage of correlating this with your business and risk context. So Sumedh talked about use case using agentic AI, that how some of these prospects or many of you who do not have cybersecurity asset management, how you are able to create your business entities top down. So I'm going to take real world example of a customer, existing customer like you, how bottoms up you would be able to create your business entities so that you would be able to visualize how your assets map to your entities to know your true risk. So again, first part, what this customer was able to do is bring in all the asset telemetry from Qualys sensors, non-Qualys data coming in. They leverage the active or native asset tagging or discovery capability, so the customers was able to know if this particular asset was a database versus a web server versus an endpoint. This data got correlated with their ServiceNow CMDB to understand if these assets were a part of what business apps, or if this particular asset was a part of a particular tier or department. And then bringing in data from their BI and their GRC tools to correlate the dollar value or what was the business value of all of these assets. But the most important part they were able to also bring in, these assets are owned by which users or which roles. All of this together, they were able to actually create how their view of business entities would look like, mapping their assets bottoms up, mapping all of these to their tags to business entities. Now that you have all these assets created, let's actually see what's the outcome you're able to drive. Now, really interesting first outcome was, though that the customer was using multiple tools, like CrowdStrike, Defender, GitLab, Qualys, BitSide, etc., when they correlated all these assets together, even after deduplicating, Qualys ETM showed that they had 30% more assets, which the security tools did not know about. And obviously, all of these assets had the exposures. But the second most important part is the attribution on your assets. If you actually look into the CISA of the vulnerabilities of 2024 and 2025, do you know why you're not able to actually reduce the risk of some of these vulnerabilities? Because 47% of them are related to end-of-life, end-of-service. So now ability to get a technology debt report to proactively track your end-of-life, end-of-service mapped to your inventory. So this capability has been there for long in cybersecurity asset management. It's now extended to non-Qualys data. So you would be able to now generate your end-of-life, end-of-service report for Wiz data, for your Defender data. So you'll know many of these exposures coming in, how many of these are actually related to end-of-life, end-of-service. And then obviously ability for you to know your 21 to 25% of unknown assets found from the external scanning. But the most importantly, the part on the right-hand side of yours, closing ticket faster. When the customer was able to bring in their ownership data mapped to assets, and this is not just asset, but ownership data of their infrastructure and their applications mapped to assets. And with connector connecting to ServiceNow ITSM, all of these assets and vulnerabilities had the same owner. So when the tickets got created in downstream ITSM, guess what? Surprise, the Java tickets actually went on the application team's name and not on the infrastructure team name. Help them close the risk faster than any other way. So this has been the outcome of now cybersecurity asset management integrated with ETM and extended for non-Qualys telemetry. Now, obviously, one of the key innovation, what we are bringing in to the unified asset inventory, we're just excited to talk about is we are bringing in the asset relationship graph, not only providing you how the assets are correlated with each other, but also showing you business entity-wise hierarchical view of all of your assets. So you're able to understand if any of your business entities, how they're mapped to your apps, down the hood, how they're mapped to which components of your assets. If any of your components, such as host, containers, your infrastructure assets are responsible for increasing your risk to your higher level business entities. This is almost the hierarchical view your business entities need to understand the reason why their TruRisk is going up. It's almost like a family chart or the family tree where you will be able to know which is that bad cousin which is increasing the risk of your family. Now, the second part, what it allows you to do is essentially the layer of agentic AI going across all of these chevrons. So you'll be able to now aggregate and interact with this data to understand if I could get insights of which particular component is owned by which particular user and which component is increasing my risk. So all of this available for you to have interaction and get the insight with our agentic AI. Thank you. Kevin, am I on time? Okay. I thought its time is up already. All right. And then the last part, but really important, as the asset relationship and the forest would also have the mapping of user. You would be able to visualize which user is increasing the risk for which asset, and then create ticket from your workflow. With that, I'm going to just quickly give you a quick demo of how this could look like. If we could go back. Ray, if you could go back and turn on the demo environment, please. All right, so I'm logging in ETM. Obviously, Sumedh showed the demo from fully agentic AI. I'm going to go over and showcase some of these how could be visualized. So the first part of Enterprise TruRisk Management is bringing in all of your telemetry of your assets and your exposures together. And then how would you be able to visualize that in terms of risk forest from business entity top down to coming to your apps level, coming to your asset level, and visualizing your true risk. So quickly, just coming in, I'm just providing my organization's name, would be able to understand what my business entities look like externally in, but the same structure would be created from your assets, bottoms up from your existing asset. Going to take an example over here. Once you bring in Qualys data automatically, you would be able to also bring in other telemetry, such as from Wiz, CrowdStrike, Defender, or any other tools what you would have. The first thing, the Enterprise TruRisk Management, this is the biggest step, is able to do is aggregate, but also deduplicate the findings. This is one of the important part operationally to understand if any of these assets got skipped while getting the deduplication done. If any of the data got actually dropped while doing the integration. And then you can visualize all of this as unified asset inventory coming in all together, getting the detailed view of how many compute I have, containers I have, web applications what I have. But that's not the magic, right? The magic part is actually visualizing that in terms of your risk forest. So now understanding how your executives want to track this down for your business. So I've taken the same example. Now, Acme Corp is made up of 6 business units, but the one which is increasing my risk, you would be able to see, is the checkout app. Now, I'm going to look into overall business app, which is obviously number of sub-applications making this particular business app. Now, I would be able to see that looks like the next view app is increasing my risk the most to my finance or checkout app. Now, I will go down to visualize if this next view is made up of what components. This is today what we are assessing. Now, bringing this upward, you are able to see that, OK, looks like my hosts are the reason why probably the risk has gone up. And then I would be able to interact and get the summarization. Like, OK, looks like these hosts are increasing my risk. Could you tell me the reason of this risk for these hosts? I'm able to quickly understand the risk has gone up because many of these hosts which are increasing my risk are end of life, end of service. Now, I'm obviously curious, security analyst. I want to understand and create the technology debt or end of life, end of service report by correlating all of this data. So now the technology debt report is extended for you to understand what is overall risk is increasing, but these are all the softwares coming together from the likes of Wiz, from the likes of CrowdStrike, Rapid7, et cetera. The reasons why my risk is not going down is because I have all of these software, which are end of life, and all of these are the risk I'm exposed to. Awesome. So we'll go back, Ray, back to demo. Back to the slide deck. Awesome. So now that we have the unified asset inventory, the second part, what we would be able to look at driving is getting all of these risk factors aggregated, correlating the threat intel. So let's look at the 3 key elements, what Sumedh talked about, what we absolutely need to bring in together. Identities, misconfigurations, and vulnerabilities. By the way, the DBR report shows that these 3 are the top attack vectors from 2025 DBR report. But now if you look into them in siloed, obviously many of them are responsible for the breaches. But at the end of the day, you want to visualize how many of them as toxic combinations, increasing my risk the most. How many of these are actually the reason my overall risk has gone up? And the reason why? Almost 1/3 of the attacks in last 2 years use the combination of all 3. So using and making sure that you check the toxic combinations of all of 3 is the key part. Now, obviously, all of these risk factors are present in your hybrid infrastructure. So just taking an example of a vulnerability, this could be present in your cloud, container, in your web application, on your remote devices, etc. So not only bringing in the risk factors, but bringing in from your various hybrid infrastructure elements, that's really important. You could be using Qualys or Palo or Wiz for your cloud and container. You could be using Qualys, again, or any other vulnerability management tool for your remote devices. All of this data would be able to come in all together. Now, as the data comes in together, I'm not going to go and spend a lot of time, as Sumedh already talked about. This particular Fortune 5 customer was able to bring in all of this data, but what was the reason they were able to bring in? If you see the red dots coming in, they obviously had exposures which were risky individually, but they wanted to actually get data together to visualize as toxic combination and reduce the risk faster. Now, this is the part what Sumedh showed us. So now see how Qualys TruRisk is able to actually bring this risk down to 4%. The part what Sumedh talked about, all of these threat feeds correlated with all of these exposures. Now, of course, you can get one or two threat feeds correlate in Excel sheet, but it actually provides out-of-box rules, such as getting the data from recorded future to see if exposures talked about in dark web forum. Just because it's talked about in dark web forum doesn't mean it's risky. Now it actually checks if it is weaponized out there in the wild, or if they're just a POC kit. Next, it actually checks if any of these are exploited for your industry out there in the wild with any threat actor. Just taking an example, you can absolutely Google one of these CVs. This is how TruRisk QDS or the QVSS is able to prioritize your low severity vulnerability by taking all of these indicators. If you have just one or two, you might not actually be able to prioritize right. So it's taking that, hey, this was on trending since last 2 months. This vulnerability was actually exploited by threat actor with a weaponization kit, and now it got added July 2024 in CISA. That's why this is 9.5 or 95. But majority of them are applicable to this use case. Even if there was CVSS, 60% of those findings from CVSS got deprioritized. 88% of findings from CrowdStrike expert service got deprioritized by using the approach of checking if it's exploitable in environment, if it is actually exploited by your threat actor in the industry, and what is the EPSS, etc. And all of this is done at real time, at scale, for you to know what Sumedh showed, that how we came to these 4% of your exposures were really the priority. Now, as all of this data is getting prioritized, the question you could be asking, let's take the challenge. Sumedh said we need to be faster, more proactive than attackers when we prioritize these risks. So how you would be able to see or validate that? So what we did, we took the sample of 2025 CISA caves. Right? This is a sample of all the CISA caves which happened in 2025. Guess what? 45 days before they got added in CISA cave. This was the QVSS score or the QDS score provided by Qualys for these vulnerabilities. You want to know where the CVSS was? Much below. So what's the outcome? The customers who are prioritizing using TruRisk, they were prioritizing 70% of their exposures 45 days before they landed in CISA cave. Now, Sumedh talked about -1. You are 45 days before they got landed in CISA caves. So this is the power what TruRisk provides as an outcome, how proactively and fast you'll be able to prioritize. The second part, I'm going to take few examples of the data coming in from Defender in the same customer environment. 3 million findings when they came out. Obviously, 60% of them as critical. What TruRisk prioritized, that you all only had to look at these 8% of them. But the other way around example is really interesting. This is needle in the haystack, that you actually thought this million-odd findings were not critical. But when we correlated with threat intel and actually found out that there was an activity going on these exposures. We found out that 3% of those were actually critical, which you had to look at. And all of this is provided in an audit-friendly manner, so that when your IT team says that, hey, I want to understand why did you prioritize or deprioritize this, the evidence is with them. You can Google search all of these vulnerabilities. You can ask your other teams to open their consoles and find these vulnerabilities and their rating. These all got reprioritized in a right way for them to understand what the risk looks like. Now, at the end of the day, as you are proactively managing all of these vulnerabilities, these exposures, you want to also understand how can I now manage the risk of these trending threats happening in the industry. Last week or a week before, Scattered Spider or Club or some of the other threat actors were exploiting some of the environments. Now, many of the customers started asking us, hey, how would we be able to know if we have these exposures in our subscriptions, which we would be able to prioritize? Now, today, when you get these news feeds, you need to now do so many manual activities. So this chart from our friend, but look at the amount of manual activity you need to do there. First, you need to understand what industry I'm in. Then I want to know, like, what are my trending threat actors for my industry? Then want to understand if I have those software and those exposures in my environment. Then get to know if any of these are increasing my risk. And then how do I reduce this risk? So many manual efforts and so many disconnected processes. The ETM is now extending the power of its threat-based risk prioritization with TruLens, which allows you to do proactively adversary-based risk prioritization. First thing, you're able to get the knowledge automatically based on your industry is in, if any of these are trending in your environment. Then getting to understand the exposures and its true risk, and if any of these are your high-value internet-facing asset and your business entities which are at risk due to some of these trending threats, and then getting your risk reduction plan for the same. So April is going to do a demo of TruLens, how using agentic AI, how you would be able to track some of these activities in an integrated manner. So all you would be able to get is no noise, but actually the trending threats which are happening to your industry for you to drive this case. Now, one of the interesting parts with TruLens is actually the toxic combination. You could be having hundreds of thousands of assets, and the threat could be applicable to plenty of them. But how many of those are actually increasing your risk where there is no mitigation? And many of these assets would be having high business value. So all of this would be provided automatically for you to prioritize risk for your trending threat actors. This is how you would be able to also track these 4% of your vulnerabilities or the exposures which you have in this 4%. Now, another interesting part, what I'm going to do is, let's just look into these 4% of these prioritized exposures. Now, what if I tell you that out of these 4% of vulnerabilities, 25% are already mitigated, and you didn't know that there was mitigation. And percentage of them, 10% of them, what if I tell you that you probably said there was mitigation, it didn't work, and I can confirm that they're exploitable. So this is one of the ways what Qualys would be looking at tracking it. The reason for that, what we saw in our research, 50% of CISA KEVs could have been prevented by actually checking their exploitation. But in the research, we also saw 1/3 of the times, the mitigations, the WAF, the firewall rules, or even if the EDR is activated, the vulnerability was still exploited. Because many a times this testing was done in pre-production environment, in non-production environment, by assuming some of these controls been working. So we are really excited to talk about TruConfirm, again, integrated with your Enterprise TruRisk Management, allows you to, again, bring in data from Qualys and non-Qualys sources. So you can bring in data from, let's say, Tenable or Rapid7 or Defender. Of course, TruRisk will be able to prioritize that based on threat indicators and business context. Now, out of those 4%, you will be able to push these for TruConfirm scan. And the scan will actually, in a safe scanning manner, would be able to validate if any of these vulnerabilities could be exploited in your production environment by actually testing or checking if any of these security controls are working. And at the end of the day, as this TruConfirm understands that how it was able to get through your WAF, you would be able to understand and fix some of these mitigations which were not working. How does it really work? So ETM, which would collect all of this telemetry, will prioritize risk and push it to our scanner to scan in a safe scanner manner all of these vulnerabilities. Now, the scanner is creating a separate profile in an unauthenticated manner. Using the attacker's approach, will actually send a payload which is not malicious. It is crafted for network connection as one of these examples. So we'll be sending a safe mechanism for you to test. In case of SharePoint, we'll be sending the HTTP post request and then bringing the data back on what your client is actually producing. If it is responding to my request of HTTP post, then that will come back via scanner in ETM to confirm that if any of your firewall or your WAF did not work, and will increase your true risk for these vulnerabilities. Also, will reduce the true risk of these vulnerabilities if we find that there is no exploitation possible with existing mitigations. So all of these will have lower score in terms of all of your vulnerabilities. Now, Saeed has a specific session on threat research unit and will be giving a demo of the same tomorrow at around 12 p.m. to showcase the same example of SharePoint, how he was able to actually send the post request, what output he was able to get, how this is actually a safe way to check some of these in your environment. Now, Sumedh talked about the second biggest exposure, the misconfiguration. We are all love to run CIS benchmarks. By the way, hope you looked at the news of their funding, etc. So, but yes, so if you're running the CIS benchmarks in your environment, typically what we have seen when customers are running CIS benchmarks, our research data shows that on an average, 40% of these CIS benchmark controls are failing. And 70% of these misconfigurations are related to, guess what? RDP, access privileges, access controls, etc. All are resulting into ransomware attacks. So you could be having a machine fully patched, but if it has the RDP open or not hardened, that is sufficient for your attacker to go through. So the same capability, all these CTAM, many of these players outside, they would provide you a mechanism to prioritize risk of vulnerabilities. But in this case, the ETM is extending the power of TruRisk to also prioritize the risk of your misconfigurations. So you're able to see if you have any misconfiguration, if it's talked about in any threat actor, in any threat vector, if it is related to RDP or elevated access, if it has actually been a part of any of the ransomware attack. And then if it's a part of the CIS top 5 controls, what you absolutely need to apply, because those are required for all of your compliance mandates, based on which you'll be able to prioritize also the risk of misconfigurations. That will take care of 2 out of your 3 biggest attack vectors and see them as toxic combinations coming together. The third attack vector, what Qualys has not been assessing so far, is the identities. And we are really excited to talk about Qualys is launching identity security posture management in a risk mechanism. So this is integrated with your ETM, called as ETM identities. you would be able to now assess the risk of all of your identities. Now, this is supported in dual mode. You would be able to inventory all of your human and non-human identities using Qualys sensors, as well as bringing in the data from Active Directory, from Entra, from Okta ping identities, etc. What is that going to allow you? That will allow you to correlate if I have any of these users on my machine which has a ransomware vulnerability and the reason why my risk is going up. So bringing in data, again, from your identity risk providers, bringing in data correlating with your Active Directory, and then helping you understand your toxic combinations. One of the key interesting capability we are adding in this is now external attack surface management will have ability to also pull in your leaked identities and credentials from dark web. So guess what now? No other identity security player is providing this ability. You're bringing this data from some of these feeds here and there. Now the risk prioritization is able to understand that which identities have risk and which assets have risk on which they present, and if they are known to dark web to your attackers. All of this combined together with ability for you to take an action to reduce your risk quickly, specifically related to identity, is a big game changer, we think. Now that covers 3 out of 3 biggest attack vectors what you would ever want to manage in your risk operations center. Now with that, just going to give you one particular example. If a user, taking an example, if has a weak password, which we understand from Active Directory, you would be able to understand if any of those are having MFA disabled. Guess what? Coming in from your Entra ID. And then if any of these are present in your attack path, which can actually go towards your Active Directory or Oracle database. And for you to understand if any of these assets have any remotely exploitable vulnerabilities. All together to know if your TruRisk has gone up because of these toxic combinations. This is how we are correlating all of this data and completing all of these exposures together. Now, I feel like Sumed and I are showing this particular view of risk prioritization so many times. By this time, you must be martini drunk, probably. But what I want to mention is all of these prioritization allows you to understand if any of these are key contributing factors which are increasing your risk within this 4%. Should I be concentrating on vulnerabilities or misconfigurations or external exposures or identities, or should I look at all of them together? Provides you both mechanism when you look at all of this risk. And then at the end of the day, you would be able to create various risk reduction plans to reduce your risk. Many of your departments or your asset tags would require different risk reduction strategies. Some of them would want to track and close all of your ransomware vulnerabilities quickly enough in an aggressive manner. Some of them don't. So you would be able to create now custom risk reduction plan for each of these departments to drive your risk reduction journey. And my favorite part is, like what Subed mentioned, instead of moving and showing the dashboard tourism, working towards helping your IT team, working towards reducing your risk faster. Now remember, though your IT team is responsible for actually clicking and deploying the patches, you all know nobody in IT loves reading KB articles. So it's on you. So you need to provide the right data mapped for right remediations for them to go ahead and respond to some of these exposures. Now, at the end of the day, when we look at it, the risk prioritization or the risk remediation, the problem is twofold. One part, what Sumedh talked about, is you need to bring your MTTR down. This is also a key part which your IT team need to track. When Sumedh showed for 0 days -1 as time for exploitation, if you look at even overall CISA caves across all years, now the exploitation opportunity for attackers is of 12 days. They're taking around 18 days to weaponize some of these vulnerabilities. Now guess what? Now attackers are actually defining what should be your MTTR. Now, it absolutely should be less than 18 days. Now, at the end of the day, for internet-facing asset, it needs to be, in fact, lower than that. Needs to be around 5 days. Now, let's see how Qualys TruRisk Eliminate has been helping customers achieve this MTTR with integrated risk prioritization. Going to take an example, the impact what Qualys patch management part of TruRisk has been able to have on our customer. Right? The reason why it's been one of the biggest capabilities recognized by even analysts is not because it deploys patches. Of course, it deploys patches. The biggest magic is not deploying patches. The biggest magic is what you guys are doing, is mapping the biggest bang for my buck patches to vulnerabilities. So you're able to understand what are top 10 patches, what I can apply to reduce the highest number of riskiest vulnerabilities. Altogether, as Tammy is saying, that I have 5 minutes. Now, oh, did you say 3? Okay. Now, if you have VMDR, you actually have risk reduction plan out-of-box provided free. It's a bad word for our times, but this is included in your VMDR. So you'll be able to actually track which are your biggest indicator, which are increasing your risk. You would be able to see their tracking or trending to understand why your risk is not going down, because obviously the current approach is not working. But even when your IT team wants to actually patch it or reduce the risk in their own environment by using their tool, now Qualys TruRisk Eliminate integrates with your SCCM and Intune to run these jobs and reduce this risk. This has resulted into Qualys applying 140 million patches and mitigations in customer environment across all of these 3 operating systems and hundreds of these third-party applications where this has been amazing for our customers to reduce the risk. Now, this is not just automated patching tool. It allows you to do rollback, allows you to also drive your remediation in a smart chaining manner. So you can apply remediation on 5 assets in your test environment. If it works fine, you can actually replicate that job to run in your production environment. And also does this job in your own ITSM environment. Now, do you want to actually see the MTTR for our existing TruRisk Eliminate customer? 18 days we have to be, right? This is what our TruRisk Eliminate customers' MTTR looks like. 5% of customers, can you believe it, are actually patching within 5 days risky vulnerabilities on internet-facing asset. 9% of them within 10 days. So overall, 18 days was our magic figure. Guess what? Almost 50% of Qualys customers are remediating risky vulnerabilities within 17 days. And just taken, again, a sample of various vulnerabilities, and every type of vulnerability is able to actually patch it faster than any other tool. Doesn't deploy faster. It just reduces your mean time to communicate the right patches with right asset for right exposures for right teams. And just giving an example, again, CISA caves, really risky vulnerabilities. If you see on the y-axis, Qualys patch customers, and on the X number of days, you'll be able to see almost 50% of customers are patching less than 10 days to remediate these risky vulnerabilities. Now, let's relate that you are using TruRisk prioritization and being 45 days ahead of CISA cave, adding them in their vulnerability catalog. And you're remediating them within 10 days. That means before CISA adds them to their catalog, you actually have fixed that vulnerability. That's how powerful the integrated elimination been to our Qualys customers who've been prioritizing their risk. And then this is actually the outcome you're able to tell your executives that because of the reason I'm able to patch, I'm able to actually reduce all of these attacks. At the end of the day, still the percentage of vulnerability remain in your environment, and that is what your attackers are after. Generally, as 20% of these vulnerabilities remain open, these become the indicator for attackers to go after. These result generally in 1 in 4 in ransomware vulnerabilities. And it's not because your teams don't want to patch. Your teams are telling the patch can break my critical system. That's why we are really excited to talk about AI-powered patch reliability score integrated in our TruRisk Eliminate. What does it allow you to do? It allows you to understand what are my high reliability patches are, which are my medium reliability patches are, and which patches are of low reliability. So you can now segregate high reliability patches with low criticality asset. There's no excuse to actually automate them while providing a fantastic change failure rate to actually use mitigation, to use eliminate, to reduce the risk of the vulnerabilities on your critical assets. So this will help you segregate. So how would it work? This is typical 100,000 assets environment across any other sample size. This is typically how the vulnerabilities segregation look like. 10,000 of them on critical and non-critical asset, 30K on critical, while having some of them as business impact asset. All of these are increasing your MTTR. All of these are making you exposed to this threat actor. And now with patch reliability score included in TruRisk Eliminate, you would be able to actually see how you would be able to track them and reduce this risk further. The patch reliability score, which is AI-powered, not magic, but it is looking into the performance of all deployed patches so far. It's looking into the chatter going on Reddit, on an internet, on particular CVEs, on particular patches. It's looking into your vulnerability reopen rates for you to actually bring in all this information to drive in a very informed way how you'd be able to drive patch automation versus stage rollout versus deploy mitigations instead of applying patches. So this is a combination which allows you, first time we are launching your patch elimination report. Again, it is included with your VMDR. So you'll be able to see how many vulnerabilities which I have, if I'm behind my peers in my MTTR, and then getting a personalized plan to reduce your risk across third-party apps, across all of these Microsoft vulnerabilities, and drive it in this patch reliability scoring manner to reduce your risk further. And at the end of the day, as all of you are experts, as you all know about risk now, let's participate in our fiercely competitive game of Risk Buster. Been taken amazingly well across the globe, with a lot of teams across the globe fighting it out and then winning this prize. A lot of questions around search for an asset which is unknown to you, which is the riskiest exposures, etc. The time to beat is around 34 minutes. Let's see if this group is able to beat that. And then the last chevron, what I want to talk about at the end of the day, is bringing in all these exposures together and then correlating with your control objectives so that you will be able to drive your audit readiness report in the same manner as your GRC teams are driving, so that you provide your audit readiness report for NIST, to HIPAA, to high trust, and all of them. And I want to wrap it up by saying that why should you be bringing non-Qualys data to Qualys ETM, which is your Risk Operations Center? Look at the enrichments it is providing on top of your non-Qualys data. First thing, if you bring it in, say Defender or Wiz data, getting your tech debt report, end of life, end of service report, prioritization report to deprioritize the ones which do not matter, ability for you to track your biggest threat actors based on this underlying data, confirming these exposures by running exploitation or exposure validation scans, ability for you to track your exposures to remediations down, and then providing an ability for your remediations team to patch the right vulnerabilities in an automated manner versus mitigate the ones which have low reliability score. And then providing all of this all together as a part of ETM. So Kunal is going to cover the talk. A lot of questions which I got in the break. If I have VMDR, what do I get? How do I get access for all this agentic AI? So all of these capabilities would come in as a part of Enterprise TruRisk Management. Yes, if you need agentic AI, being on ETM is almost a must because it's almost giving you democratized access to Qualys and non-Qualys data to get insights to drive every step in an autonomous manner. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for staying for my presentation.